Welcome to another episode of the PFF College Football, a live show once again, Dalton, previewing the 5 biggest games of week 2. It was an amazing week 1 of college football. It felt like Christmas morning. Honestly, Dalton, being here in the PFF offices and watching a whole slate of games, man, but every week now we got a new slate of games to talk about. These 5 games that we're talking about right here. But let's start off with week 1, man. It was a really interesting slate of college football, and a lot changed in our top 25 because of it.
Absolutely, and a lot changed even in the 2 days since we did our review show. We had 2 more really fascinating games the last 2 nights with USC and LSU, and of course Florida State and Boston College last night. So there's certainly a lot of change in any top 25 that anybody's making. But I'll tell you what, week 1 was the roller coaster of, it's I've been calling it the season of chaos, right? And it's going to be like that every single week, with especially everyone having their playoff outlook and who's the new top 12 and who's the new conference favorite and everything like that. It's going to be like that every single week, and the rankings are going to change wildly week to week like they always do.
Absolutely. So let's actually look at our brand new top 25 in college football heading into week 2. This is Dalton and I's rankings right now. And Dalton, as you can see, a school that in the AP poll started off in the top 10, the Florida State Seminoles, they're completely out of the top 25 now after starting 0-2. But to you, what stands out in our second ranking of top 25?
A couple of things. I think Notre Dame at 3. It was hard for us to place because you had Oregon struggle with Idaho, and then you had Ole Miss and Texas took care of business. But Notre Dame going into one of the toughest road environments in all of college football and playing just outstanding defense, and Riley Leonard at least showing us that he can manage a game like that. Notre Dame's probably going to be in several games like that this season, right? Low-scoring defensive games. You and I both think they're a top 3 to 5 defense in the country, and I think for Leonard to keep his poise in his first game in a new environment against his old head coach who knows him very, very well, it's a huge win for Notre Dame. And you really look at the rest of their schedule, it sets up for them really well now to make a playoff run. They had to get through the first one. Young offensive linemen played well. Young running backs played well. But I think Notre Dame is a real threat now, especially after winning that game. We both projected them into the playoff before the year, but we had to see them get through this game. I think they could be one of the favorites early on to get into that top 12.
I think they absolutely can as well, man. And yeah, I think they're like number 6 in the AP poll right now, which I don't think it's giving them enough credit for what they did in this game. And yes, this top 25 is very reactive to what we just had in college football, but also like that's what it's supposed to be at the same time, right? So Notre Dame at number 3 is like, yeah, it seems high, but if, say, another school like Oregon has a big game this week that we're going to talk about, if they look dominant, Oregon will move back up the list, right? That's how it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be, wherever you have them preseason, you're supposed to have them until they lose. No, you've got to update your things as it goes. So Notre Dame might seem a little high for people at number 3, but that will change as the games go on, right? So I think that's one thing that stood out to me as well. Miami now officially in the top 10 for us after dominating Florida in that game. You got USC making a big jump up to number 16 in our ranking as well.
How good was Miller Moss?
Dude, he was the best quarterback of the whole week.
I mean, absolutely between him and Cam Ward, but Miller Moss had to put that team on his back, and he just made big throw after big throw, under pressure, on the move, in the pocket. Any throw you could think of, he made. Miller Moss might have gotten on some NFL radars with that game.
Quite literally, Dalton, right when you said that, USC football, just like my tweet of breaking down Miller Moss's stats from week 1. So they heard us.
He was and Garrett Nussmeier was really good, too, for LSU, but Moss was just incredible, especially in the fourth quarter.
Absolutely, yeah. He really, I mean, Lincoln Riley never has a bad quarterback, ever. And Miller Moss is the next guy up, man. But the next one that we other teams that we have, Georgia Tech at number 20, Iowa State number 25. These are some new schools that are joining our top 25 now after really looking pretty impressive. Iowa State obviously had North Dakota, but Georgia Tech, after beating Florida State in week 0, they all of a sudden joined the top 20 now of our list.
Yeah, and all the talks about Florida State being 0-2, but Georgia Tech is 2-0, and I know they were playing Georgia State on Saturday, but there's also the jet lag coming back from Ireland. They didn't get to play all the way on Monday this week like Florida State did. Mm-hmm. They had to turn around on the next Saturday and play a game against a Georgia State team who's usually pretty game, and they took care of business now. I think Georgia Tech now, with the way the ACC is setting up, really has an opportunity to take advantage and maybe work their way up the standings. Big game this week against Syracuse also.
They absolutely do. So let's go over some of our biggest games of the week now that we're talking about, and the biggest game of the week that you and I will actually be in attendance for this game is number 3 Texas at number 10 Michigan, which is at noon Eastern time on Fox. this is probably the biggest non-conference game of the entire season. It seems early to say that, but when you look at it, it's really right now the only non-conference game between two top 10 teams that we have on the entire college football schedule. So this has massive, massive playoff implications. And yeah, it's still early in the season, but you got to think the loser of this game could have a lot of difficulty getting into the 12-team college football playoff because they have many games after this against difficult opponents. Texas still has to host Georgia and play Oklahoma among some other SEC opponents. Michigan has to host Oregon and USC and then travels to Ohio State at the end of the year as well. So this is the biggest non-conference game of the year, and the winner of this game is set up very nicely for the rest of the season, but the loser of this game really doesn't have too much wiggle room in order to make the 12-team field.
Yeah, I think what it is for both is you have that thing now with a 12-team playoff where you can afford a loss or two, but it's also an opportunity where, oh man, we could lose this game, right? And you talk about Michigan especially and the way their offense looked last week, and we're going to get into that in a minute. They've all those tough games you just mentioned, right? If you at least have a win against Texas under your belt, you get some breathing room, right? Okay, if Oregon comes in and beats us, or if we lose the Ohio State game this year or something like that, then you've got some room if you don't win the conference. And the same goes for Texas. I mean, it's neither one of us picked them to make the SEC title game. They very well could, despite us not picking it. Obviously, there's 6 or 7 really good teams at the top of the SEC, but it gives you breathing room if you win. It gives you a signature win if you win, right, to get that at one of those 7 or 8 at-large spots. It's a huge game. I agree. I think it's the biggest non-conference game of the season.
I want to make sure, because I know some people listening to this might think, oh, is he saying the loser of this game is automatically out? No, absolutely not. The loser of this game is still in the conversation for this, but the loser of this game, like I said before, just not as much wiggle room after that, especially with all the teams they got left on their schedules. Dawn, you had the Michigan offense in this game, which kind of looked a little shaky in the season opener against Fresno State. So what is the matchup that we should be looking at when the Wolverines have the ball?
So it's really, for me, about Michigan's passing game. They're going to find a way to manufacture things in the run game. They're going to find enough rushing yards every week. They bring in Alex Orji as a Wildcat quarterback when they take Davis Warren out of the game. Davis Warren, a naturally better passer, although he kind of struggled on Saturday against Fresno State. But the big matchup, I think, for any team that plays Michigan, you sit there and you go, how do we cover Colston Loveland? And I mean, the realistic answer is you can't, because he is the best tight end in the country. 8 catches for 87 yards on Saturday against Fresno State with a touchdown. The rest of the team had 8 catches for 34 yards. He single-handedly carried their passing game, lined up out wide or in the slot on almost half of his snaps, the other 27 at tight end, obviously. He's the best tight end in the country for a reason, right? And he's a matchup nightmare. I think you and I both think he could very well be a first-round pick at the position this coming draft. He's the matchup problem. And when Fresno State, when he lined up out wide, they tried to put guys one-on-one on him. It just was not happening. So when you look at Michigan's passing game, right now it's completely centered around him. And the problem with that is, for as good as Loveland is, can he carry that against big-time teams like this, right? When you talk about now, Davis Warren on Saturday on throws of 10 yards or more, air yards, 1 for 5 for 10 yards and an interception. And the only completion was exactly a 10-yard out to Colston Loveland. So they have issues right now getting vertical. Now, if I look at Texas last year, we talk about, well, there was times where Texas's secondary struggled, right? But they struggled with the deep ball, right? They struggled with vertical passes. We saw it in the semifinal game against Washington. Under 10 yards last year, a 93.4 coverage grade for Texas. That was 24th best in the country. On throws over 10 air yards, they had a 27.9 coverage grade. That was in the bottom 15 of the country. So
wow.
If you can't get vertical on Texas, they're a lot more comfortable playing back, coming up, and making tackles and just keeping things in front of them. And right now, look, I know it's against Fresno State. It's one game. It's a new quarterback. Davis Warren's trying to work his way, filling big shoes with J.J. McCarthy. Yeah. You've got receivers filling big shoes with Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson leaving. Can Michigan get vertical with somebody else, or does their passing game only run through Colston Loveland? It's the biggest problem I think they have right now. I think they're going to be able to run the ball with some success, and Loveland is a freak of nature. He moves different than any other tight end, but they need Warren and they need these wide receivers to step up to win vertically down the field.
They definitely do. I don't know if you watched all of Colston Loveland's tape, but I actually had a buddy of mine, Max Toscano, on Twitter, send me a couple clips of his run blocking.
It was better.
He was pancaking some guys out there.
It looks better. They were running behind him too. No, he was the best best player on the field, and it wasn't close. Yeah.
He's phenomenal. He is the best tight end in college football. So my matchup to watch when Texas has the ball is, all right, can Quinn Ewers do it again? Can he deliver once again in a hostile environment against an elite defense? Look, Quinn Ewers is not a perfect quarterback by any means. But when the lights are brightest, this guy shows up, dude. He does. In his second career start ever against Alabama in 2022 as a redshirt freshman, he had a 90.2 grade and 3 big-time throws in the first quarter of that game, Dalton, before going out with that injury to his shoulder. And then the following year, he was fully healthy, had a 90.6 passing grade against Alabama with 3 big-time throws and no turnover-worthy plays in the Longhorns' upset victory over Alabama in Tuscaloosa, by the way. And granted, Alabama, as you see on that graphic, they had a top 10 highest graded defense in both 2022 and 2023 with guys like Will Anderson Jr. that one year, Dallas Turner was there, Kool-Aid McKinstry was there, Terrion Arnold was there, Caleb Downs was there last year as well. They had superstars on that defense, and Quinn Ewers still shredded them. So yes, there are some games like the Wyoming game last year where he doesn't look great. You're like, okay, how do you look great against Wyoming? But then against Alabama, you really show up. Well, listen, Michigan has an elite defense as well, and they have some of the best players in the country. In fact, the top 2 prospects on PFF's 2025 NFL Draft Big Board, which you can find right now at pff.com, made by the great Trevor Sikkema. Top 2 prospects are Michigan defenders, and Mason Graham, the D-tackle, and Will Johnson, the cornerback. And Dalton, when you look at my preseason rankings for position-wise, there are 6 Wolverine defenders that were in the top 10 of their respective positions. Now, one of them, Rod Moore, is still recovering from that torn ACL, so he won't be playing in this game. But that's still 5 guys, man, that you really have to take account for. They really have maybe the most loaded defense in college football. But Quinn Ewers has done it before against Alabama. Can he do it again in the big house on the road like he did last year against Alabama? That's what I'm really looking forward to, because I think if you look at all the other matchups in this game, it's a really, really fun game. The offensive line for Texas is one of the best in the country. The D line for Michigan, one of the best in the country. I think Texas has some really, really good receivers. Michigan obviously has an unbelievable secondary. Everything is an awesome matchup. So that's why I think it really comes down to, can number 3 be the superstar that he was against Alabama? And if he is, then Texas is winning this game, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think what you have, first of all, you have a great coaching matchup too.
Yes.
Steve Sarkisian against Wink Martindale. I don't think there's a better coaching matchup that we're going to see all season. But the theme in those Alabama games too for Quinn is getting over the top, right? Throwing those deep balls. I do wonder if not having Rod Moore, if this is the game where it hurts them, right? Because at some point Sarkisian's going to want to take a shot, right? He's going to want to take the top off. They're not afraid of anybody. Quinn Ewers has shown he's not afraid of anybody. So I'm curious to see those weapons, right? Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond and those weapons. Can they get vertical, and can they hurt Michigan's safeties without Rod Moore in there?
Absolutely. So Dalton, in this game that we'll be attending, the biggest game of the weekend and one of the biggest games of the entire season, arguably the biggest non-conference game of the entire season, who wins? Does Texas pull it out, or does Michigan get a massive home victory?
Watching Michigan's passing game, and I think this is some of the concern that we had in the preseason. I think their defense is absolutely good enough to win this game. I think their running game is good enough to win this game. I think they can manufacture enough. Kalel Mullings looked really, really good last week, ran really physically, but I worry about the lack of balance for Michigan. And if Colston Loveland is the only option for them in the passing game, and Davis Warren and Alex Orji can't figure it out on their end, I think Texas finds just enough points in this game. They have so much talent. Steve Sarkisian's such a good play caller. I have Texas 24-16. I think as long as Texas doesn't turn the ball over, then they're gonna find enough points to win this ball game, right? And Michigan, they scored 30 points the other night, and 14 of them were a direct result of turnovers, and they only had one drive that went for over 50 yards. I think Michigan, it's so methodical right now, and if Texas makes a few big plays and doesn't turn the ball over, I like the Longhorns.
I almost have the exact same prediction as you. I have Texas winning 24-17. I have Michigan scoring one more point than you do in this game. I agree with you. I think Michigan is going to continue to struggle to find its identity offensively, and I think Ewers will do just enough. I don't think he'll go absolutely nuclear like he did against Alabama, but he'll do just enough in this game for the Longhorns to pull out the victory and continue right now, which has been a really good start to the season. They killed Colorado State, and if they get this win, a top 10 victory on the road over Michigan, a lot of people are going to talk about them as legit national title contenders if they weren't already, honestly. So both of us have Texas winning this game. And also, if you're in the Ann Arbor area and you're a viewer or listener to the show, hit us up. We'd love to meet you guys there if you guys are going as well. So make sure you guys hit us up for that. We cannot wait for that trip to Ann Arbor. That's going to be a lot of fun. Next one, we're talking about, Dalton, another a really good rivalry game that we have at 3:30 on CBS. That is the Iowa State Cyclones at number 21 Iowa. I think the really storyline to know in this game is, can Kirk Ferentz kind of continue his dominance over Matt Campbell? And Matt Campbell, listen, he's done a phenomenal job as Iowa State's head coach in his 9 years there. In fact, in 2020, Iowa State finished in the top 10 of the AP poll. That was the first time they've ever done that in school history. However, he's had a difficult time with his in-state rival because Kirk Ferentz and Iowa have won 7 of the last 8 matchups, and Kirk Ferentz has a 6-1 record over Matt Campbell. So Matt Campbell is really a phenomenal coach, but he's only beaten Iowa once in his career so far, and see if he could do it in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got contrasting styles, right? You've got some kind of the finesse in the passing game and the skill players of the Big 12 and Iowa State against just the rugged ground and pound defensive play of Iowa. We went over enough times with Iowa last year how they certainly lean towards the defensive side of the ball, right? But they at least looked functional on offense last week with Cade McNamara back. I think that's what it is I think there's more often in those 7 of 8 victories that you mentioned that Iowa's gotten to play their style of ball, right? So you have a contrast between the two teams, and I think the team that gets out ahead, just like Iowa did last year, I think that's the team that's at a big advantage in this game.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, you had the unfortunate task. We actually had Mitch Kaiser decide for us who would get the Iowa offensive side of the ball, and thankfully he picked you, not me, for this one. So what should we be looking out for when the Hawkeyes have the ball in this game?
So there's one, before I get into the matchup, there's something we need to talk about. We've talked about this now we talked about it Sunday, the year of the true freshman wide receiver.
Yes.
Max? There are so many true freshman wide receivers that are balling out right now that even Iowa got one. Yep. Reese Vanderzee, barely inside the top 1,000 recruits in the country, 6'4", 207, played quarterback actually his senior year of high school, 4-sport athlete, football, baseball, basketball, track. And he walks in and he has 5 catches for, I believe it was 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I read something that he was the first true freshman at any position to start under Kirk Ferentz in the season opener.
Wow.
Yeah. And now after his performance in that game, he is listed as one of the starting wide receivers.
Should be.
Moving forward on their depth chart. He's look, if they actually have a passing game, that you got a whole different ball game with Iowa, right? Last year they had injuries; they were just devoid of any function in the passing game. You've got McNamara back, you've got tight end Luke Lachey back. Now you've got Vanderzee, you've got a 6'4", 210 guy out there who can really move, go up and catch 50-50 balls. And look, don't mistake Iowa for a team that's could throw it 40-50 times a game, but they need to be able to throw it 25 times a game with some sense of function. And honestly, the first 3 games last year before McNamara got hurt, or actually I should say before the Penn State game, and then he got hurt in the Michigan State game. But those first 3 games, they did look like a functional offense, and they looked at least like a functional offense last week. Had to get through some jitters in the first half and figure some things out. I think there's some small tweaks in the run game. But as far as the matchup go, I really want to get into Iowa State's defensive line.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to have some concerns about the trenches on the other side too, but they run their defense kind of weird. They have that 3-man front. A lot of times against spread offenses, they drop 8 and do things like that, but they just struggle to rush the passer. And you wonder if it was a product of losing Will McDonald in last year's draft, where now they just haven't replaced him, right? A 62.2 pass rush grade last year, 126 in the country. A bottom 5 pass rush win rate, only 21 sacks all season last year. This is a problem against any team. Even a non-premium passing team like Iowa, you can't leave any quarterback a clean pocket, especially a pocket quarterback like Cade McNamara. Even he will find a way to beat you, right? And I think a big thing early in last year's game, Iowa found a couple of explosive plays, okay? And you talk about, one, the 3-man front, and sometimes Iowa State sitting too far back. You give Iowa opportunities to run with all their tight ends and get into their running game. They completed a play-action shot that set up a touchdown. They had a long run at the end of the first quarter. Actually, the shot, I think, set up a field goal. The long run at the end of the first quarter set up a touchdown. Then there was a pick 6 that Rocco Beck threw right before the half, and before they knew it, the game was 17-0. And I don't care who you are. If you're down 17-0 to Iowa at any point, good luck coming back. Because this is a team that just, they hold you down. They're so good They are so good at preventing explosive plays and making you work for every yard you have, and they have such a big advantage in the trenches in this game, at least on this side of the ball. And I know, look, Iowa's offensive line struggled last year too, but 4 of their 5 starters from last year are returning. And Iowa State, against North Dakota even last week, they only won 21-3, and they had some issues, especially on the ground, stopping the run, and they didn't get a ton of pass rush going against a team like North Dakota. Even though they only gave up 3 points, it wasn't the prettiest game they could have played. They had a hard time getting off the field. So I'm a little worried about Iowa State's defensive line holding up again against Iowa's offensive line.
Dalton, I have the same issue on the other side of the ball. Listen, I like a lot of what Iowa State has on this team. Miles Purchase is a really good corner. Caleb Bacon's a good linebacker. Rocco Beck's a good quarterback. Jaden Higgins is a great wide receiver. They have issues in the trenches, man. They have serious, serious issues in the trenches. In fact, their biggest issue last year was the offensive line. They had the lowest graded offensive line in the country last year at a 47.4 and second lowest in the country, and lowest in the Power 5. They also were the Power 5's worst offensive line in pass blocking and run blocking grade. And they brought back all 5 starters from last year, but they really struggled to get any movement in the run game this past weekend, even against North Dakota, an FCS opponent. They had a 49.9 run blocking grade, which was the 3rd worst mark by a Power 4 offensive line in week 1. So even against an FCS opponent, they weren't getting pushed in the run game. Now, listen, they were doing well in pass protections. That at least was a bright spot, but they weren't getting pushed in this run game at all. And last year, Iowa's defense led the country with a 93.6 run defense grade. So I don't know if Iowa State's going to get anything going in that ground game, because I don't know if that offensive line has really improved at all. It was the biggest issue with the team last year, and at least through week 1, I mean, in run blocking wise, it's the biggest issue this year as well. So I do like a lot of what Iowa State has in that defense, in that second and third levels of the defense, and in the quarterback and receivers they have on offense. But if they don't get anything going offensive line-wise, I really think Iowa could dominate them on front.
I agree. It's a huge problem, especially when you consider the style of ball that Iowa plays, right? And the talent. They lost Cooper DeJean, but the talent they still have on their back 7. Iowa State last week against North Dakota basically won the game because they could just do anything they wanted on the outside, right? You have a really good trio of receivers. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, who made just a spectacular catch on the very first play of the game, and Eli Green, the transfer from North Dakota State. Ben Brahmer at tight end. Rocco Beck's a really good quarterback. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the Power 5. But you're playing a team in Iowa with Xavier Nwankpa, Quinn Schultz, Jay Higgins in the middle, Nick Jackson in the middle, Jamari Harris at corner had an interception.
Sebastian Castro,
Sebastian Castro is a monster in the slot, best slot corner in the country. They had the lowest, they allowed the lowest percentage of 15-plus yard pass plays in the country last year by a whole percentage point, which for that metric is a lot. Iowa makes you work for it. Even last year when they played Penn State and Michigan and Tennessee, they didn't get shredded in the passing game. They just don't. They don't give up big plays. They sit back. They're so fundamentally sound. Their landmarks and coverage are just perfect, and they're one of the best tackling teams in the country. If you're going to beat Iowa, you have to be physical with them, right? And all those teams are, right? Michigan's physical with them. Penn State was physical with them. Tennessee ran all over them. Nico Iamaleava had 3 rushing touchdowns in that game. That's how you beat Iowa. You got to be more physical. If you think you're going to go out there against Iowa and just chuck up go balls and your receivers are going to win that battle, you're going to have a long day.
Absolutely. So, Dawn, who wins the matchup of the Cy-Hawk rivalry is what it's called, actually. So who wins the Cy-Hawk version of 2024?
It's one of the better names for a rivalry in college football.
I think it's kind of unoriginal in some ways. It's just like Cyclone and Hawkeye. I kind of love it. It's just like, Cy-Hawk.
It almost sounds like just a new creature they're creating.
Sounds like a Marvel character. Cy-Hawk.
Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, no, you know what? I got to be honest. I came into this thinking I was going to pick Iowa State to win. And the more I watch both these teams and watch last year's game, and this time it's at Iowa, I just think Iowa's, their style of ball, if Rocco Beck doesn't find explosive plays somehow, and against this defense, I'm not sure how he's going to do it. You can't just throw up jump balls and hope they're going to catch them all. You have to run the ball. You have to run block. You have to, even on the defensive side, you can't lose. You can't decisively lose the battle in the trenches, especially against a team like this, and think, okay, we're going to win a ball game anyway, right? And they have to avoid turnovers. They had a huge pick 6 in the game last year that Beck threw. Iowa State, we're going to talk about them a lot this year. They're going to be better. I just think this is a style of play that doesn't work to their advantage. And for as much as Iowa struggled last year, with Cade McNamara in there, they have a functional enough offense. They have a spectacular defense, a top 10 defense, if not higher. I've got Iowa winning 19-10 in a low-scoring game.
Okay. I think it'll also be a low-scoring game, and I also have the Hawkeyes winning. I have 20-13. I think Iowa is going to dominate in the trenches on both sides of the ball, offensive line and defensive line, and win in a defensive slugfest. And yeah, you mentioned Ben Brahmer. Excellent tight end. I'm a huge fan of Ben Brahmer, man. He was a really good tight end in his true freshman year. But you have Xavier Nwakpo, you have Quinn Schultz, and those guys. It's like I just think Iowa is going to match up so well with them defensively. And if they're winning, dominating up front like I think they can, then it could be really difficult for Iowa State to get anything going offensively this game. So I have 20-13, my final score for Iowa over Iowa State. Once again, Kirk Ferentz beating Matt Campbell. Next game we're talking about, Dalton, is Eli's new school. Number 14, Tennessee, against number 24, NC State, which is a 7:30 night game Eastern time on ABC. My storyline, at least for this game, Dalton, these are two schools that handled their Week 1 FCS opponent very differently. Tennessee took care of business. They had a 69-3 win over Chattanooga. Nico Iamaleava really lived up to the 5-star hype he had coming out of high school a couple years ago. His first ever regular season start, had a 91.2 passing grade, that tied for 8th among FBS quarterbacks in Week 1. The Wolfpack struggled against Western Carolina, and they really weren't able to go on cruise control like Tennessee was in their game. In fact, NC State was losing to Western Carolina heading into the fourth quarter before pulling away for a 38-21 victory. So both schools start off their seasons with a game against an FCS opponent, but Tennessee handled business. NC State really came down on the wire.
Yeah, and we talked about the ACC in our review show about just how top to bottom there was really a lot of struggle all over the place, right? There's only a few teams that have really impressed us so far, including Miami and Georgia Tech. And NC State trailing to a team like that who isn't really considered one of the FCS powerhouses, it was a little bit concerning to watch. Obviously, their stars made up for it. Kevin Concepcion is a monster. If you don't know this guy yet, true sophomore wide receiver. He was also their leading rusher last year on top of being their leading receiver. This guy's a guy we're going to talk about in the 2026 draft. I think a story for me in this game too, Max, is you've got two teams who have real opportunities in front of them. I know the way we've been talking about the ACC lately, all of a sudden it's like, man, are they going to be the conference to only get one playoff bid? And if you're NC State and you're trying to stay in an at-large conversation, this is a game you need to win. As far as Tennessee goes, we look at three big games on their schedule. This game, the Alabama game, and the Georgia game, and go, if they win 2 out of 3, they're a lock.
Yeah,
they're a lock. It starts with this one. This is a big matchup for both. Again, playoff implications. Maybe not quite as big as Texas, Michigan at the end of the day, but I think both teams, if they have playoff aspirations more so than just trying to win their conference, because we didn't pick either of these teams to win their respective conference, this is a game that each have to win, and they have a lot to prove.
They have a lot to prove, absolutely. That's a good point. This is a massive game for playoff implications as well. Dawn, you had the NC State offense in this game, so what should we be looking out for when Grayson McCall and the Wolfpack have the ball?
One thing NC State did too right last week was their pass protection. Grayson McCall was up on his feet all night. He had all day to throw last week, and there was some throws where the accuracy wasn't totally great. The ball placement needed some work. He's adjusting to a new offense and timing and things like that. But their pass protection was spectacular. And I have to look at their tackles, right? Anthony Belton, who's an NFL prospect, Jacarius Peak at right tackle, came in last year in the second half, became a starter in the second half of last year. Now he's entrenched in that spot. Those two guys combined for an 87.4 pass pro grade last week. But they've got a whole different challenge coming than what Western Carolina is throwing at them. They got James Pierce Jr., number 27 for Tennessee, coming at them. Our edge one in this year's draft, as far as it goes right now. And you look at what he did last year, 91.9 pass rush grade as a sophomore, third best in the Power 5, 13 sacks, tied for second most in the Power 5, and just an insane 21.8% pass rush win rate. This guy's a freak of an athlete. He's got everything in his bag. And the first thing that needs to happen if you're playing Tennessee, any team playing Tennessee, go, how in the world do we either block or avoid number 27? Because this is going to be the biggest challenge. And Grayson McCall, coming off of a year with a career-low 51.1 passing grade under pressure at Coastal Carolina, it was also the first time that he was under pressure at least 30% of the time for a season at Coastal. So what you're getting at now is, if they can keep him clean and get the ball to their playmakers like Kevin Concepcion, they stand a chance. Absolutely, they stand a chance. They're going to be in this game. But if Pierce gets the pressure, and he only played 10 snaps last week. I haven't heard about any injury to James Pierce. I'm assuming they were just keeping him fresh for this game and just going, you know what, defensive players don't win the Heisman anyway. We'll just save you. We'll just save you for next week, and we'll unleash you against NC State. I haven't heard any news. I don't know if you have about that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with James Pierce. I think they just were taking it easy on him in week 1. That's the biggest thing. Can they block James Pierce? Can anyone else from Tennessee's pass rush emerge alongside of him? Because that's been a big topic lately over the last few weeks. I think that's where the game is going to be decided, is if they can protect McCall, give him the time in the pocket to make the throws, and make the throws in an offense that's still very, very new to him.
Yeah, I don't see anything about James Pierce Jr. injury-wise, so I think that really was probably just him.
Just taking it easy on him, yeah. I guess. Yeah.
Makes sense. So I'm excited for that, man. I think James Pierce Jr. against Anthony Bellin could be a really, really fun matchup, NFL draft-wise, absolutely. My matchup I'm looking for is Nico Iamaleava versus the NC State secondary. He has been nothing short of spectacular in his first 2 career starts. 91.7 passing grade. If you combine the bowl game against Iowa last year and last weekend's game against Chattanooga, 4 big-time throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays combined over those 2 games as well. He has a rocket launcher attached to his right shoulder and appears to already have complete command of Josh Heupel's offense as well. I understand that the offense makes it really difficult as a draft evaluator, but Nico Iamaleava is going to really be an interesting study next year in the 2026 NFL draft, because you look at him, he has all the tools in the world to be a number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, but obviously that offense will play a part in it, but he really looks spectacular so far. I will say, though, the best part of the Wolfpack defense is their secondary. In fact, I would have had them, I only ranked the top 10 secondaries in the country. NC State would have been around top 15, top 20 if I extended my rankings. Aiden White is the star of that secondary, the cornerback. He's the 6th most valuable returning Power 5 corner since 2022, according to our wins above average metric. They also added some really talented DBs in the portal, like Auburn safety Donovan Kaufman, Ohio State slot corner Jahad Carter. And Jahad Carter missed last week against Western Carolina, but he is set to make his Wolfpack debut after an injury. So that's what Dave Doran said, at least. So Jahad Carter will be playing this week. I will say, though, senior safety Devin Boykin, who's a good player, he will not be playing in this game. Dave Doran said that Boykin will be out until at least October because he suffered a torn ACL during, I think, bowl practices in December of last year. So he's going to be out for at least another month or so. So he won't be playing in this game. But I still am really excited for this NC State secondary against this explosive Tennessee passing attack led by what looks like an absolute superstar quarterback in Nico Iamaleava.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, if Josh Heupel could build a quarterback in a lab piece by piece to run that offense at hyper speed and as vertical as they get and allowing him to run, it would look like Nico Iamaleava. It's just, he is the perfect quarterback for this offense, and he's got the rifle for an arm, the 6'6" frame. Again, three rushing touchdowns against Iowa in the bowl game last season. We didn't even really see him run that much this week. I mean, he was just teeing off as a passer. This is as true a dual threat as we have in the country right now, and in this offense, this is why he was so high in my Heisman rankings, because he could just put up stupid numbers in this offense, and a lot of quarterbacks do. You remember Hendon Hooker a couple of years ago, but Nico's got even more tools than Hooker did, and a loaded group of wide receivers to work with.
He absolutely has that. So what do you think? Do you think NC State's going to bounce back a little bit and get a major victory over Tennessee, or does Eli's Volunteers look excellent once again and get the victory?
I like the Volunteers in this game. They're so explosive. Brew McCoy and Squirrel White and Chris Brazell and Nico's arm, and they're just so explosive. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game because NC State has playmakers. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Kevin Concepcion for a long, long time, and he was really the main reason that they won that game against Western Carolina last week, that they came back and won it. But I've got Tennessee 42-28. I just think there's going to be, unless you have a really special defense, I mean, you're talking the Georgias of the world and you know, the SEC. We'll see how they get through SEC play, and NC State has a good defense. They do. But This is a group of freaks offensively, a bunch of veteran receivers, and Nico at the center of it all. He's just a perfect fit for this offense. I think they're going to put up a lot of points in a lot of games this year, and I got him with 42 in this one. NC State's 28.
I love it. Listen, this is not a home game for NC State technically, but it is in Charlotte, North Carolina, so kind of a home game for the Wolfpack. But I'm with you. I think Tennessee's winning this game, 35-24. I think Nico Iamaleava is absolutely on a scorching start to his career, and he'll lead the Volunteers to a victory in this game. And I just got to see more from NC State. Grayson McCall, he graded out okay in that game, but you and I were watching him. He was inaccurate on a number of throws as well. I have more questions with NC State right now than I do with Tennessee, and I think Tennessee is going to get a big-time victory and keep climbing the rankings after winning this game. We want to get Eli's pick, though, in this game. Eli's Volunteers, obviously he has no bias towards them at all right now. So, Eli, what do you think is going to happen in this Saturday game?
Vols by 1,000,000.
All right, Vols by 1,000,000. So,
wow.
You can get Tennessee -10 right now. So that's the bet of the year, according to Eli.
I'll tell you what, he's just jumping right deep in the wagon, isn't he? He's just all the way in. Wow.
It just means more.
It just means more. That's true. Yeah. Before you came into the office, he was trying to pull up Nico Iamaleava highlights on Ultimate. He couldn't get it for some reason, but so he's all in, man. He is all in on the Volunteers.
He's just going to have to believe us then.
Yeah.
That's it. He'll just have to believe the experts.
That's true. Okay, another matchup we got, Dalton, a really, really fun one, is the Colorado Buffaloes at the Nebraska Cornhuskers, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC. The storyline to know is pretty easy. These are two quarterbacks that are must-see TV. In fact, Dalton, are there two quarterbacks in the country that draw people in more than these two that we have in this game?
This is just entertaining, isn't it? You've got everything around Colorado and Shedeur Sanders that he might be QB1 in this year's draft, and then you have one of the few, if not the only true freshman starting quarterback right now.
In the Power Four, at least. I think San Diego State has a starting quarterback. Oh, that's true,
yeah. In the Power Four, and it's certainly the highest profile one, right?
Yes.
You've got the Rayola name at Nebraska, and then he goes out, and I know it's UTEP, but it's still his first college game. He's slinging sidearm throws. He's slinging deep balls when he's getting hit like this.
Yep.
He's got the Patrick Mahomes lookalike thing. I don't know that there's two more entertaining quarterbacks in college football right now. And you thought last year's Colorado-Nebraska game was fun. The fact that Nebraska now might have a quarterback to match Shedeur, this is a whole different ball game here. This is a lot of fun. Under the lights in Lincoln. I mean, you couldn't ask for it's the weirdest thing too, because I don't think you could have a more fun game between two teams that didn't make a bowl game last year.
Yeah.
And yet it's just totally magnetic. It just draws you in with there's so much star power on both of these teams. Nebraska is trying to make a comeback right to prominence. Colorado's trying to make it with Coach Prime and Shedeur and Travis Hunter and all of this. This is the most entertaining. This might actually be the best game of the week, honestly.
We got to race home from Ann Arbor after this. We got to right when that game's over. We got to get out of there.
We have 250 miles of ground to cover, and we better cover it quick. Yeah.
We got to get back for this. And listen, Shedeur was awesome in that game against North Dakota State. 90.7 PFF grade, 5 big-time throws, a tie for the most in the country in week 1. And Dylan Raiola, listen, he's not the coach's son like Shedeur Sanders is, but he's the prodigal son for Nebraska. Obviously, the first 5-star recruit for the Cornhuskers in 19 years, almost 2 decades since Nebraska's had a 5-star recruit come in. The first 5-star quarterback ever for Nebraska as well. Also the son of Dominic Raiola, legendary center for Nebraska, won the Remington Award, had a long career in the NFL, the Detroit Lions as well. His uncle, Donovan Raiola, is the offensive line coach at Nebraska. The Raiola family is royalty at Nebraska right now, and Dylan Raiola is, like I said, he's a prodigal son for them, and he actually looked really good in that game against UTEP. 79.5 PFF grade, Dalton. That was the best debut by a true freshman quarterback in 6 years. The last time we saw a grade higher than that was Sam Hartman in his true freshman debut for Wake Forest. So Dylan Raiola really getting off to a hot start against UTEP. I cannot freaking wait. You can't. There's some games where one side of the ball is way more fun than the other side of the ball. These are two quarterbacks, dude, where you're like, I cannot look away from the TV because I don't miss anything.
I think we were quietly hoping last week that Raiola would look really good.
Yeah.
Just for this scenario to go, okay, all right, maybe the hype's real. He had a great first game, and now we're talking about, now he gets
people are already throwing the Mahomes stuff out. I'm not ready to say that, but they're throwing it out there.
Yeah, easy now. You're talking a guy in the GOAT conversation there, but I think we were really curious. We had it on last week going, how good is he going to look? It's UTEP, yeah, but it's his first college game. And some of the throws, I mean, There are special moments for sure, and this could be a very special moment if Nebraska were to pull away with this one.
Absolutely. So you, Dalton, had the Colorado side of the ball in this game. What should we know when Shedeur Sanders and that Buffalo's offense is out there?
The formula is simple, right? I think now for over a year we've known this. You have to get to Shedeur Sanders or he's going to kill you, right? And Nebraska's pass rush last year was really a big variable between them winning and losing ball games. They were 90th in the country in team pass rush grade last season. Didn't have a single player last year with at least 30 pressures. And you look at the splits of when they won games last year versus when they didn't, okay? 5 games when their team pass rush grade was over 65, which is like just a solid mark. They went 4-1. 7 games where it was under that number, they went 1-6, including the Colorado game. Okay, so if they don't rush the passer, they're good in coverage, but not good enough to overcome just an inept pass rush, right? And Shedeur Sanders in the game specifically last year, we know he's great if he's protected, but he had so much time to work with. And on throws of at least 2.5, released after 2.5 seconds, I should say, 2 touchdowns, 2 big-time throws, 12 of 20 for 191 yards and a 92.6 passing grade.
Wow.
Too much time to operate last year. And look, they got Colorado off to a slow start. They didn't score for the first 25 minutes of that game, and then it was 10-0 at halftime, and then the avalanche came. Nebraska has to get to Shedeur Sanders. You have to beat Colorado's offensive line. They looked pretty good in pass protection last week against North Dakota State. Better in the pass game than the run game. I thought they were improved. I think North Dakota State threw some fun stuff at them, some stunts and things like that, mixed up coverages, but the facts are the facts. Shedeur in a clean pocket might be the best quarterback in the country right now. He might be the best quarterback in the country regardless because he can improvise a little bit too, but I think the same principle holds. If Nebraska can't get to him, last year they tried to blitz him even, 0 blitz, and he still found a way to beat it. Even when they blitzed him, he found a way to beat it. They threw different coverages at him. They went drop 8, tried to make him hold the ball longer. That didn't work. What is the answer? What is the answer for Nebraska to get to Shedeur Sanders? Because we saw teams like last year, right? UCLA. They just had monster pass rushers, so they won that battle. Teams that win the battle in the pass rush against Colorado's offensive line, then you can stunt them. Because honestly, they're still not particularly good at running the ball. There's not a lot of balance in this offense. And I think for as much as it gets talked about with Colorado's offense, I know everyone wants to see balance. I know everyone wants to see them not be last in the country in rushing. And you don't want to be dead last in the country in rushing. But they're not going to have a whole lot of balance. And honestly, if I had Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter and Will Shepard and Jimmy Horton and Amarion Miller and LaJohntay Wester and whatever other weapons, I'd probably throw the ball 80% of the time too. I can't blame them. That's their best chance to win, and their best chance to win is to protect Shedeur Sanders and allow him the time to make throws downfield.
Absolutely. My matchup to watch, Dalton, when Dylan Raiola has the football. Is Colorado going to be as aggressive in man coverage as they were last week? We talked about this in the Sunday review show. So Colorado's new defensive coordinator and Robert Livingston and the Buffaloes ran cover 1 on 48 of its 69 defensive plays. That equals almost 70% of their defensive plays were in cover 1. They had varying levels of success with that coverage. The Buffaloes allowed 5.9 yards per play on those snaps, and they were exploited multiple times by the Bison with man beaters, with QB run, with some inside zone runs as well, because they're so predictable defensively. North Dakota State knew exactly what they're going to do, so you can't do the same thing here against the Cornhuskers, and if they do, Raiola could pick them apart. In fact, last week on throws against single coverage, he had an 86.9 passing grade and completed 3 of 5 passes for 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, and his only big-time throw of the day was against single coverage as well. So he was fantastic against single coverage. Yes, very small sample size, obviously, but he was really good against single coverage. I will say this. It stands to reason that they probably won't be that aggressive, right? Because defenses, when you think about it, why do they run cover 1? Why do they run man coverage? Well, usually is when you have a clear athletic advantage with your defensive backs against opposing wide receivers, and clearly Colorado had that against North Dakota State. Nebraska has some guys. Jamal Banks is a very good receiver. They have other really good weapons as well. So they probably won't. And also, when you play cover 1, when you play man coverage, that allows you to put more guys in the box. And we talked about it. You got to stop the QB run game and the run game overall with North Dakota State. So there were reasons why Colorado ran man coverage and cover 1 specifically that often. But at the same time, it's like, okay, was that just the game plan for that game? Or is this the defense the entire freaking season? That's what I'm really looking forward to seeing. I think it's the former. I think they're going to have a different look on defense in this game. But I'm just worried that Save is something different. What if they run cover 3 every single play? Like, are they just committed to one play every single time, or will they be more varied with their looks on Saturday?
We'll see, because it's a problem they had a lot last year. They were a high man coverage team last year, and I actually did some digging, and in single high defenses last year, they were the lowest graded defense in the Power 5. So I would think you get a new defensive coordinator in Robert Livingston, and some of that changes at least a little bit. Now, again, could be a game plan thing, and Livingston was a defensive backs coach with the Cincinnati Bengals under Lou Anarumo, and Anarumo's really famous for making very, very different week-to-week game plans. So maybe he took that out of it. That's what you hope for, is you go, that's what they did for North Dakota State. We've got something different for Nebraska. It's dangerous to do it, right? It's dangerous to play man coverage that much. You mentioned almost 70% of the plays last week. The nationwide leader in man coverage rate last year was Illinois, and they were just under 59%, and them and Purdue were the only two teams above 47%. Yeah. And they just did it because they played in the Big Ten West, and they had good secondaries.
You're going to worry about passing games in that conference.
You can play press man every play in the old Big Ten West when you're playing Northwestern and Iowa and Minnesota and all these teams, right? This is different. I mean, when you're playing a quarterback like Dylan Raiola now, and a group of receivers that's ascending. This passing game is ascending. This is not the same passing game as Nebraska last year. They had the third worst passing grade in the country last year. They were so hamstrung by their quarterback situation last year. It was a big part of why they lost this game last year. So I think the quarterback battle, the battle in coverage on both sides, the battle in the pass rush, especially for Colorado protecting Shedeur, there's a lot of variables in this game. And I always love rematches. You just get to see the adjustments from the year before, and then the new variables that step in, Dylan Raiola being the biggest one. It's going to be so much fun to watch this game.
For the simple fact of why they should play different coverages in this game, it's a 19-year-old quarterback.
And actually, you know, that's something I was meaning to say. When you man-to-man and single coverage and one-on-one matchups, especially when they're pressed, it's the easiest thing for a young quarterback to see.
Yeah.
You just go, okay, I'll just chuck it up then. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to guys moving around and rotating safeties and zones and figuring out who's blitzing. If you line up the way Colorado did most of the time against North Dakota State, you make it way too easy, one, on a quarterback, and two, on a play caller. I think a lot of North Dakota State's biggest plays were just, they're all on that list of things you do to beat man coverage. You mentioned the pick plays and the mesh concepts and quarterbacks scrambling. I mean, quarterbacks can run on man coverage because everyone's got their back turned, right? Yep. That's why you don't play man coverage against guys like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, those guys, right? And you can't even do it against Cam Miller at North Dakota State because he'll just take off on you. It's such a fascinating aspect of this game on both sides is the coaching. It is. I think it very well could come down to the coaching and who finds the schematic advantage for either side.
That's why I was saying, man. I don't think you can have the same coverage every single time against Raiola because he's going to be able to diagnose it. It's like for a true freshman quarterback, throw a lot of different looks at him and say, okay, can this kid actually diagnose it, or is he just going to beat the one coverage he sees all night? So that's going to be a really interesting matchup, I think, in this game. Dawn, I was going back and forth. I don't know who's going to win this game. I'm 50-50. I'm still on the fence right now.
Yeah.
Who are you going with to win this game, though?
I'm with you. I think this was the hardest game to pick. I think you have two teams with so many variables and especially with Colorado, such defined strengths and weaknesses, like so clear-cut towards the passing game. And then we're curious to see how they're going to be coached on defense in this game. It's going to be a closer game than last year. The improvement for Nebraska at quarterback makes this a closer game alone. And we've only seen Raiola once, and I can already tell you it's an improvement from last year, what they had. And they're not handcuffed with their play calling. I like that Nebraska found balance in their game last week. That was against UTEP, but they want to keep the balance. I think that's going to be big for them. But I think it's a coin flip. I'm taking Colorado. I'll take Colorado 34-31, and I just think I liked what I saw in the trenches from Colorado last week. I did. I thought their defensive line, the run defense, played a lot better when it wasn't scrambles and quarterback draws that were schematic disadvantages with your free safety one-on-one with a 230-pound quarterback and things like that. I'm going to have the faith that there's some adjustments to the defensive play calling. I'm going to have the faith in Shedeur Sanders, who might be the best quarterback in the country, despite, again, all of the noise, all of the bluster, all of the everything. He's really, really good. And his ability to diagnose coverages, I think, is just about better than anybody in the country. I'll take Shedeur. I think if this game – here's the thing for Nebraska. I think if this game does become about just Shedeur versus Raiola – Shador's probably going to win. I don't think you want to get in that shootout. I think if you're Nebraska, you want to be able to win in the trenches. You want to have balance, and you want Raiola to have one of those days where he throws for 240 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
You don't want him to have to match Shador and all those weapons, because Shador is going to win those types of games against most teams. He just has to get to them and be protected enough to get to them, right? So Nebraska is going to want to have balance. I'm just concerned with them not getting to Shador last year. And his ability to diagnose coverages is such an X factor. There's so few college quarterbacks can do it at a level he does. Mentally, he's as good as any quarterback, if not better, in the country. I'm curious to see what Nebraska throws at him. I'm curious to see what Colorado throws at Raiola, but I'll stick my neck out there and go with Colorado in one more big game, and we will see where this goes, because obviously it's the biggest lightning rod in college football.
I will go on the opposite side here. I'm picking Nebraska to win this game, 31-27. I think Raiola is going to shine under the bright lights and lead the Cornhuskers to a major win. I think Nebraska's defense, I really like them. I really do. And I think if Colorado is completely one-dimensional offensively, which they've been for 2 years now, that could be a major issue. So I think if Nebraska's able to key in on the passing game, and I know it's really hard to stop Shador Sanders and those receivers, trust me, I know that. But I think Nebraska, like you just said before, will be way more balanced than Colorado. They'll have more answers for Colorado. I think Colorado is basically, okay, Shador, Travis Hunter, go win this game for us. And if they can't do it, they can't do it. And we're not winning this game. So I think that's going to be the story for a lot of Colorado games this year, honestly. So Nebraska's going to win. It's a coin flip for me. I can see it going either way. But I will go with the Cornhuskers. And I think the home environment will play a big factor as well. I think that Lincoln is going to be jumping in that game. That's going to be an awesome game.
It's their biggest game in a long time.
Very much so. Very much so. I'm very, very excited for that one. All right, the final one that we're talking about, Dalton, is Boise State at number 7 Oregon, 10 p.m. Eastern time on Peacock, actually. So you got to get your streaming service all set up to watch this game. There's a couple of storylines that we could talk about for this game. One, the Boise State side of it. This game has massive playoff implications for Boise State. If you look at the betting odds right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, Boise State is second among Group of 5 teams behind Liberty in terms of betting odds to make the college football playoff at plus 450 right now on DraftKings. It's still incredibly early in the season. I know that's week 2. But how they perform in this game specifically will go a long way in determining whether or not they get that spot in the 12-team field if they win the Mountain West Conference. Because if they get blown out by Oregon, just blown out of the water, the committee could look at that. And if Oregon doesn't win the Big Ten and is still the best non-champion, Oregon will be the 5 seed. Boise State could be the 12 seed. And they'll say, all right, do we want to see Boise State, Oregon again? Like we know what happened last time. That, at Oregon as well, that could be a major factor. But if Boise State keeps this game close, like single digits close, or even pulls off the upset, that would give them a much better victory than any other Group of 5 team could have. Any other Group of 5 team will not have a better victory than Boise State beating Oregon, or even Boise State losing by 3 or 7 to Oregon in this game. So this is a major game for Boise State in terms of their playoff chances. And then on the other side, Dawn, that you can get into when you talk about your matchup, what the hell happened to Oregon last week? They beat Idaho, an FCS team, by 10 points. They were favored by 50 points in that game. We had Oregon as the 3rd best team in the country. We thought they had the best offense in the country. They only scored 24 points against Idaho. So, Dawn, I guess going to your matchup when Oregon has the ball right now, what happened in that Idaho game, and should we be worried about them going in the future?
I saw 2 things during this game, going back and watching the All-22. One, their offensive line just hasn't gelled yet, right? They lost Jackson Powers-Johnson in the middle. Even their tackles, Connerly and Cornelius, kind of struggled a little bit. It just, especially in pass protection, it just wasn't to the usual standard we're used to seeing out of Oregon, right? And let's look at some of these Oregon offensive line grades from last week, okay? A 69.3 overall grade. That would have been the 4th worst of any game last year for Oregon, okay? A 68 pass blocking grade. That would have been the 2nd worst in any game last year. The only one it would have been ahead of was the first Washington game. 3.8 yards per carry. Lower than any game last year that they played. Just struggling to run and struggling to create explosive runs. Only 3 explosive runs of 10 yards or more. That would have tied for the fewest of any of their games last year. So first things first, the offensive line. Now, there's some new faces in the middle of it. They've got a returning pair of tackles, but they're trying to figure out the right combination up front. Had some guys struggle on the interior. The other thing, too, that I wondered when I was watching it, and And I know they're loaded. They've got backs. They've got two good tight ends. They've got Tej Johnson. They've got Evan Stewart. But do they have a guy somewhere in there like Troy Franklin last year that can take off and get safeties out of the box and is a home run hitter? Because Dylan Gabriel's average depth of target last week was 4.3 yards. And there's nothing, I will tell you right now, the first thing I want to say too, there's nothing wrong with Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah.
He was still spectacular. He completed, 41 of 49, somewhere in there. 2.16 average time to throw, but a 4.3 yard average depth of target. I understand that Bo Nix had an average depth of target that was really, really low too, but there were enough shots taken in this offense, especially to Troy Franklin. Like Tej Johnson is not the long speed guy. I'm not sure Evan Stewart is the long speed guy. He's a great route runner, but I don't know that they have someone that can take the top off. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they've got some guys that run 4.340s that we're just not aware of yet, or we didn't see play well last week. But those are the two things that I look at in this game for Oregon. Can the offensive line gel against the defensive line that ranked 118th in the country last year and only put up a 67.3 overall grade against Georgia Southern last week? This is an advantageous matchup on paper. But the way Oregon played last week up front, you go, okay, well, is it? It should be. It still should be. I think you have two NFL tackles at the very least on that offensive line. I want to see their offensive line play better, and I want to see if there's a little more verticality to this offense, because last week it was very much working in that kind of 10-yard box, or Gabriel made a couple of big-time intermediate throws in that kind of 15-yard box. The ability last year for them occasionally to throw it over the top to Troy Franklin was a big asset. Who is going to be that guy that gets downfield on this team?
I think, yeah, it's a big matchup to watch. And, yeah, I think, one part of it, too, it was weird. You look at the team stats from that Idaho game, and you look at the stats alone, not the score, and you think, oh, Oregon killed them.
Yep.
And then it was a close game. It was weird. It was very weird. I know Idaho scored a couple trick plays, too, so a lot of it felt fluky in a lot of ways. So I do think Oregon, we'll get to our score prediction a little bit later, but I think they'll be able to bounce back. My matchup to watch when Boise State has the football, can anyone stop Ashton Jeanty? Anyone. I mean, he is our guy. We interviewed him preseason, and he told us, we're like, hey, what's your goals for the rest of the season? And he said 2,500 yards and 20 touchdowns, and I'll be in New York for the Heisman ceremony. He got 6 touchdowns and 267 rushing yards in the first game of the season against Georgia Southern. He currently is the number 1 running back on PFF's 2025 NFL Draft Big Board. In fact, Dalton, I think he's the number 11 overall prospect. And PFF, Trevor Sikkema is risking his job by putting Ashton Jeanty that high, but he deserves it. He has been an awesome running back throughout his entire career. He was the highest graded running back in the country last year, earning a 94.9 grade. So he's not just the engine of Boise State's offense, he's the entire car of this offense. If you stop Ashton Jeanty, you stop number 2, you stop Boise State. That's as simple as that, because he is that important, that critical to the offense. And Dalton, it wasn't like he was stat padding against Georgia Southern. They needed him to put up 6 touchdowns. They're like, okay, Ashton, they scored again. We got to get out of here. And they kept feeding him the ball. He broke a tackle on 55% of his carries as well. This guy is a bona fide superstar. Listen, we've made the comps before to Alvin Kamara, and usually you hear that comp all the time. This time, I think it's warranted. I think it's that kind of running back that we have. I will say, Oregon's defensive line is absolutely massive. One of the issues I had with their defensive line when we were previewing them going into the season was, how are they going to rush the passer? Because they almost are too big. But defending the run, I don't think they're going to have any issues whatsoever. All of them, Dalton, all 4 starters on the edge and on the interior weigh at least 270 pounds. They are a massive, massive defensive line. They earned a top 30 run defense grade last year, tied for 4th in tackling grade as well. And they also did an excellent job of limiting opposing tailbacks as receivers, which Jeanty didn't even do against Georgia Southern. I think he only had 4 receiving yards in that game. He's the best receiving back in college football. But last year, Oregon only allowed 38 receiving yards to a running back in a game. That was the most they allowed all year, was 38 receiving yards to a running back. So I think Oregon will be able to handle, or at least contain Jeanty a little bit in this game. And if you do that, like I said, Boise State's offense really runs through this guy. If you do that, I'm not sure how Boise State can score too many points.
Yeah, I mean, Ginty, he's an animal. I remember him telling us, he said, I want to run as powerful as Marshawn Lynch with the balance of Alvin Kamara, and I want to be a receiver like Christian McCaffrey. I mean, those are pretty good guys to look up to if you're trying to build.
That's the greatest running back of all time right there.
If you have all three of those things in one guy, that's Barry Sanders, Walter Payton type stuff. But no, I mean, it does. It all runs through him, and I think the interesting part, too, is there are times when he does line up at receiver. He was a receiver in high school. He can catch the ball. Took a jet sweep for a long run last week, too. I mean, he can line up anywhere. So it's not just in the box you have to worry about him. You have to know where he is at any of the 53 yards of width on the field, right? If you don't know where Ashton Ginty is, well, first of all, you have a problem because you just need to, right? But I do think there is a dynamic in this game where they are going to need some balance, right? You're not going to get 7 or 8 rushing touchdowns as a team every week, and 6 from Ginty. So they are going to need Maddox Madsen to work off of Ginty, and at least in the play action game for Boise State if they're going to stay in this.
Absolutely. So, Dalton, will Oregon bounce back in a major way and remind everyone why they're a top 3 team in the country entering the year? Or will Boise State get a major resume boost for the college football playoff candidacy?
I do think there's a bounce back for Oregon. I think 2 things can be true. I think Ashton Ginty can have a very good game, and Oregon bounces back. Because we saw him, he had a really good game against Washington last year, who was the national runner-up. He had over 100 total yards last year against an elite UCLA defense in their bowl game. He can have a very good game. I just don't think Boise State has enough firepower elsewhere, and I don't think they're good enough defensively to stop a team like Oregon. I mean, they gave up 45 points, was it, to Georgia Southern? 42 or 45 points to Georgia Southern last week. Oregon's a whole different animal than Georgia Southern. Now, again, there's things I want to see Oregon improve upon. I think they will. I've got Oregon 34-17. I do think Boise State could give them problems if they get into their run game and they can control time of possession and limit. I really am curious to see if Oregon can get over the top on Boise State, or if it's going to be a game that's played in the box and a little more patient and a little more at the Broncos' pace. Then you could find yourself. If this game is played for Oregon at the pace that they played it last week, and they had a couple of 4th downs they didn't convert to, but when you talk about just constantly in the box, check down, 5 to 15 yard throws, you're kind of allowing Boise to milk the clock even on defense and stay in it. I want to see if there's any home runs for Oregon. I do think their offensive line will bounce back. I think the running game will be a little bit more consistent this week. Jordan James could be in for a big week. I've got Oregon 34, Boise State 17.
Yeah, they allowed 45 points to Georgia Southern. It was 56-45 was the final score of that game. I think it'll be a big bounce back for Oregon. I think 41-20 is my final score prediction of this game. I think, again, that Idaho game, yes, it was alarming in some areas, like the offensive line and some of the receiving core issues, but more so, dude, I think it was just a fluke. I really think it was a fluke. I think Oregon is still absolutely going to be a national title contender this year. They're going to remind everyone why they're a top 5 team in the country entering the year, and they're going to have a dominant victory over Boise State with a 41-20 victory. All right, Dalton. Now we're going to our upset pick of the week. You hit your upset pick. You had UNLV winning, and Eli hit his upset pick as well, North Texas winning. So right now you have 102 points. Eli has 164 points. Big win for Eli there. So we're going to do our upset picks of this week, and we'll start off with our great producer, Eli Nagel, who currently is in the lead with 164 points. So Eli, what are you doing for your encore here?
So for my encore this week, I'm kind of taking a page from Dalton and I talking a little bit. FAU fan, but he knows how to point out their flaws when we were talking about it. And after some research, FAU currently has a 54.4 run defense grade last week, so not great. And then if you look at Army on the other side of the field, they had an 81.4 rushing grade. So I'm going to take that matchup and ride that pretty hard. I'm going to take Army at plus 150.
He's got the triple option going down to Boca and winning.
Wow.
I'll tell you what, that FAU Michigan State.
He respects his troops, too.
Yeah,
respect the troops.
Big time.
Absolutely.
Big time.
That FAU Michigan State game last Friday was ugly.
Yeah,
it was ugly on both sides, and I don't blame him. I think it's a solid pick. I think FAU. I need to see more out of them offensively too, and Cam Fancher needs to learn to slide a little bit earlier because I'm worried about him getting hurt. I can see why he got hurt at Marshall last year, but yeah, it's a struggle. And I know FAU covered the spread. I believe a 13.5 point spread against Michigan State, but it was an ugly game on both sides. Both teams really struggled in that game, and Army when they get in that rhythm, and they really started to find a rhythm with Bryson Daly late last year. carry it into this year. That triple option gets rolling, especially early in the game. They start winning time of possession. I could see the road for that, and I know the only thing will be, actually, it might even work to Army's favor playing down there in Boca, because it's going to be 9,000 degrees out there.
Yeah.
I lived down there for 5 years. I lived in Florida for 12. I know how that goes, and if you get the triple option rolling in the hot weather, defensive linemen are not going to have fun. So I think that's a good pick on Eli. Who's going next? You or me?
Yeah, you can go.
I can go. Okay. I'm going to stay in the group of 5 as well. And Max, we watched Arkansas State on Saturday.
We did.
Okay, late. We turned that game on late. They had a 17-point lead in the fourth quarter over Central Arkansas, and they actually blew it. And then Jalen Rayner brought him down, and a fabulous catch in the back corner of the end zone. He made a great throw in the back corner of the end zone, and they won. They beat Central Arkansas. It was I think it was the longest replay review I've ever seen. Also, I mean, when I tell you they won by a toenail, it was literally a toenail that they beat Central Arkansas by. They struggled a bit. They lost some veterans in their secondary. And they've got a hot offense in Tulsa coming in. And let me tell you how Tulsa's season went last year. They were really trying to figure out who their quarterback was, okay? Braylon Braxton, who's now at Marshall, Cardell Williams. And for their last 4 games, they turned to a true freshman walk-on, Kirk Francis, who ended up playing pretty well, even though I think they lost 3 of their last 4 games. And he's carried that into this year. Had a grade over 90, a passing grade over 90 last week against Northwestern State. Max, in the 5 games that he's played in college football, and after a solid 4 games last year as a walk-on, earned a scholarship, by the way. So now he's a redshirt freshman on scholarship. In that, I know it's a 5-game stretch, but he's a young kid. Since week 10 of last year, he has the 11th highest passing grade in the country. Second best in the group of 5. I believe it's 86.8 passing grade. And I'll tell you what, we see it with some, especially these group of 5 quarterbacks. Preston Stone is one of them. He takes shots down the field. He is letting it rip. Go balls left and right, letting it rip. Tulsa's getting over the top. It's a fun matchup against an Arkansas State team who was really good in coverage last year but showed some flaws last week. Again, they lost a lot of veteran guys. The key could be Tulsa's running game, too. 323 rushing yards last week, on top of Kirk Francis putting up somewhere around a 91 passing grade. I really like this Tulsa offense. I like this matchup. I'm not a huge fan of what I saw late in the game for Arkansas State against Central Arkansas. Tulsa's, I believe, a 7 or an 8-point underdog, plus 215 on the money line. I like the Golden Hurricane to go into Jonesboro and get a win.
That's a big one. That's a big one. The 215s that's sizable, Dalton. So you're going for a big one. I'm actually going for an even bigger one in mind. I'm not going in the group of 5. I'm going with a big-time game. I got Arkansas plus 230 over Oklahoma State. Arkansas is currently
in Stillwater.
Which is one of the hardest environments to win in college football. I understand that, but Arkansas right now is plus 7.5 against Oklahoma State in this game. Oklahoma State is a top 20 team in the country right now in the AP poll. I don't know exactly where they are. I got to check again. But my biggest strength for Arkansas, Dawn, entering the season, was their defensive line and linebackers defending the run. They accounted last year for 41 tackles for loss or no gain. That was the second most among SEC schools last year. And 4 of the 5 D linemen who played at least 300 snaps last year came back to school, including Landon Jackson, who a lot of people think could be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. Against Oklahoma State, their offense is Ollie Gordon. You stop Ollie Gordon, a lot like Boise State with Ashton Jeanty. You stop Ollie Gordon, you can have a great shot at winning this game. So if that run D, which I thought was their best part of the team heading into the year, if that run D is as good as I think it could be, they could not totally stop Ollie Gordon, but enough to make this a game. And the other thing, Dolan, in our preview, their biggest weakness we had was an underwhelming passing game. I understand Arkansas Pine Bluff. I understand. But Taylon Green looked awesome in that game. Career high 88.9 passing grade, 92.4 overall grade. He had 88 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in that game as well. He looked electric out there. And I remember watching the broadcast. I believe they compared him to Johnny Manziel on one of his runs. I'm not going to say that.
He's a little bigger than Manziel.
He is bigger than Manziel. He's 6'6", 230. That's not Johnny football.
That's a little bigger than Johnny.
That's not Johnny football. But if Taylon Green, listen, if that sticks, if that's more than just Arkansas Pine Bluff, and that sticks against Oklahoma State.
Bobby Petrino calling plays
too. Listen, it's juicy. I'm kind of playing in catch-up mode right now because you both hit your upset pick last week, and Miami of Ohio could not win the game against Northwestern, even though Northwestern wanted them to win the game. It almost felt like in that game. So I'm playing a little bit catch-up, so I am going with a big one at plus 230, but I don't know. I don't think 230 is indicative of how much Arkansas has a chance in this game. And with that run D, with Taylor Green looking a lot better than he's ever looked before, I think the Razorbacks have a shot at shocking the Cowboys in Stillwater.
I think, well, you mentioned Landon Jackson. Landon Jackson actually 37th on the PFF big board right now.
There we go.
So getting in that first-round pick territory, possibly a 6'7" and 280. You're right. He's strong as hell. He's going to be fun to watch in this game. And in Oklahoma State offensive line that wasn't the best run blocking unit last year, right? And Ollie Gordon only had, I think, just over 100 yards last week on a lot of carries. He didn't exactly tee off on South Dakota. He had 100 yards, but it wasn't one of his crazy 280-yard Ollie Gordon games. So if he has one of those, but it very well could come down to which quarterback makes enough plays. Is it Allen Bowman? Is it Taylor Green? Bowman more of a pocket passer who wants to make quick decisions. Green the dual threat guy. So I'm very curious to see both sides on defense what the plan is. And the running games are very different because of the difference in quarterbacks too. But you're right. Ollie Gordon's the center of attention, and if Arkansas does slow him down, then they've got a real shot.
Anyone who slows down Ollie Gordon has a really good shot at beating Oklahoma State. And I think Arkansas has a good run D, and if they're able to do it, I really think they have a good shot in this game. So just a reminder to people for this upset pick of the week. Basically, it's the money line. If you get it right, you get the money line as your point total. So Dalton right now is 102 points after last week. Eli is 164 points after last week, and I have 0 points after last week. And do we have to keep track of how many games we get right throughout the season? I think I have a 6-1 record right now, right in our previews, and you have a 7-0 record.
I'm 7-0 plus the UNLV.
We're not counting that. You keep telling me you're 8-0.
I'm calling it.
No, you're not. It's not
8-0.
It's not 8-0. That's BS. We're not doing 8-0. I'm not doing that. You're 7-0. I'll give you that. I'm 6-1 right now. We'll see what happens in this week of college football. So we cannot wait. Of course, make sure you guys tune in on Sunday morning. This time we will be at 9 a.m. So 9 a.m. Sunday morning, tune in for our recap of college football and releasing the grades from PFF of college football as well. For producer Eli, producer Saab back there, I'm Max Chadwick and Dalton Wasserman, of course. And we'll see you guys on Sunday morning with our recap of week 2.